We've all heard stories about tech employees becoming millionaires after the initial public offering. In the recent months, there have been a few tech IPOs such as Airbnb, DoorDash, C3AI, and Wish. In this video, I will give you a breakdown of how tech employees actually get compensated, as I think there is a lot of misconceptions around that. And we will talk to ex-Facebook and ex-Google employees to hear from them how big companies think about their compensation. So if you're interested, definitely stay until the end. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Luba and I'm a former product manager and a software engineer in Silicon Valley, and on this channel I talk about my journey to a balanced and productive life. Tech employee salary, total compensation or TC, usually constitutes of a base salary, equity grants, sometimes a sign-on bonus, and the bonus structure that the company has internally. Base salary. So the base salary is actually the salary, the annual amount of money that you will be receiving. Usually as a new grad, and I will give you examples of software engineers, you start at a range of anywhere from $105,000 to $140,000 a year in Silicon Valley. So in my specific example, I started as an Airbnb software engineer about 5 years ago, and my initial compensation was $115,000 a year. I actually did negotiate that salary to $120,000 a year, and that's what I've started at as a new grad engineer right out of college. So the reason why tech employees can become millionaires is usually not based on their base salary. So the base salary constitutes only one of the part of the compensation that you have, and of course base salary is cool and important, but it's the equity that really can make a huge difference when the company does go public, or if the company is already public and experiences incredible growth. This is something that I didn't quite understand and know when I've started my full-time job. I kind of, and perhaps this is my, I don't know, immigrant Eastern European mentality, because back in Eastern Europe when I was growing up, I've never heard of stock compensation, and I didn't quite know what exactly that was and why it was so important. To me, it was always imaginary money, and even though I negotiated my salary, I've negotiated my stock compensation as well. I guess didn't push as hard on the stock compensation because I was like, it's better to have money on hand now than have some like imaginary money on paper. And we will talk about salary negotiation a little more in this video, but I wanted to jump into talking about equity. And equity is exactly that pillar that can make a tech employee a millionaire or multimillionaire. And the way equity works is that you as an employee receive shares in the company. This means that you have the ability to purchase company shares at a certain price, and usually that price is favorable. So when the company does become public or when you leave the company, you have the advantage to purchase those shares at a lower price usually. Usually that's the ideal case scenario. Or they come in the form of RSUs, restricted stock units, which means basically kind of free money on hand. You just have like a certain amount of shares of the company, which then you can exercise when the company becomes public or when the company has a certain exit, like an acquisition, for example. Okay, so let's walk through an example. Let's say you joined a company back in 2014. The company was pretty small, say it was at 100 people, and you as a result, because the company is small, it has not gone through a lot of fundraising rounds, is given away pretty big number of shares to their early employees. So let's say you get 10,000 shares when you join. You get 10,000 shares, and then throughout your time at the company, you also get additional shares, because usually the company has compensation structure. You know, the longer you stay, the more promotions you get, the more additional stock grants you get. Usually companies have a 4-year vesting schedule, which means that if you decide to leave the company after 1 year, you've only vested 10,000 shares multiplied by 0.25, so 2,500 shares. So you don't have the ability to, you know, leave early and have all the shares that you were granted. So that's the whole purpose of the vesting schedule. So let's assume for the purpose of this example that you've stayed the whole 4 years. So you vested your 10,000 shares. And for the simplicity of the example, I'm going to omit any of the bonuses that you've received throughout your time at the company. So let's say you just have those 10,000 shares. Say you received RSUs, you have 10,000 shares on hand, the company goes public, and they announce that their list stock price is going to be $50 a share. But the IPO goes so incredibly well, instead of trading at $50 a share because of this extremely high demand, the company actually trades at $100 per share. So now you have $1 million on hand. And usually there is so much excitement about joining high growth startups is because you're banking on the fact that the stock stock will grow in value so much that the amount of shares that you have on hand multiplies by a really significant number. So for example, Facebook went public with the share price of $38 per share, and now Facebook is trading at $272 per share. In this specific case, it's 7x. So if you were really bullish on Facebook and you've held even some portion of the money that you've received, you could 7x that stock grant that you've initially received, which is huge. If you join a company early enough and the company's share pool is not extremely diluted, you might have a huge upside when the company exits. And that's the reason why a lot of tech employees become millionaires, because if you do have the intuition, if you do have the data to be able to join one of those unicorns that do perform extremely well on the stock market, then you can become a millionaire by virtue of luck in some way. And usually early employees have a huge upside because sometimes when the company is super early on, they actually don't give away the number of shares. They might even give away percentages of shares. For example, with Airbnb, I know some early employees that literally received like 0.01% of the company in the early days. And you could only imagine how much money did that 0.01% turn into after Airbnb went public in December of this year. I promised you guys that we're going to talk to an ex-Facebook intern and a future Facebook engineer about how Facebook compensates, and then later we're going to also ask ex-Google employee about how Google works with their compensation. Johnny.
Hey, Luba.
So, how did Facebook pay you as an intern? Did you get any equity?
No, I didn't get any equity. I was just paid a bi-weekly salary.
Gotcha. And so now you just signed Facebook's full-time offer.
Yeah.
Could you give me the breakdown of how compensation works?
So there was a base salary, equity, and then there's a signing bonus. And we also get, I believe it's quarterly bonuses based on feedback.
Do you feel like Facebook has a huge equity upside? Like, do you think you'll become a millionaire by joining Facebook?
I'm not sure about millionaire, and I'm not too quite sure like how long I'll be there. So that really depends. And based on how long I stay there, right? Like that determines how much equity I get. But I'm pretty excited about like that upside of having some stock in the company. Yeah.
I want you guys to meet Brett, an ex-Google employee who used to be on the strategy side, non-technical track, and then converted to PM, technical track. Brett, hello.
What's up?
Okay, so by working at Google, can you become a millionaire?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, Google compensates their employees pretty nicely with stock or equity. So when you get your offer, you know, the base salary or the cash salary may look pretty small initially, and for early, you know, if you stay around at Google long enough, your equity starts compounding. So you keep on getting these refreshers year after year. So I know lots of employees who could be making like, you know, in the, you know, $800,000 a year range. So obviously if you save half of that enough, you'll be a millionaire.
Damn, $800,000 a year?
Yeah.
How senior are they?
Probably pretty senior. One of the people I used to work with actually was making over $1 million a year.
Not bad. This is how Google rolls. The third pillar of tech employee compensation is usually bonuses that a company would have throughout your tenure there. Bonus structure really varies. Sometimes it's performance-based, sometimes it's based on the performance of the company overall. This is what we had at Airbnb. The company introduced bonus structure 2 years or so ago, and bonus structure at a super small or really early on startup is usually super ad hoc. When you go into a slightly bigger company or into a bigger company, they might have an actual defined system for the bonus structure. And what we had certain number of OKRs that were company based, and if the company achieved the OKR to a certain extent, then there would be a formula that calculates our bonus compensation. So ultimately Airbnb decided to do a collective bonus structure instead of individual bonus structure because that was more in line with Airbnb's culture. But companies like Netflix, I believe it might be the case with Uber as well, they had individual bonus compensation where you had your own OKRs, and depending on how you hit those milestones, that's how you received your bonus compensation. And that usually aligns better with competitive culture, with cutthroat culture, or maybe, you know, the management just thought that that was a better way to distribute the money, so they decided to go with individual bonus compensation. So this is, you know, super company specific. The other thing that tech companies usually do is create an assigned bonus. So a lot of the times when you sign sign an offer, you would actually receive additional compensation because you accepted that offer. And the reason why that happens is because the tech market is so competitive that usually that extra money that the company offers would ideally push the potential employee to sign the offer to work at that specific company versus working at a competitor. I remember when I was joining Airbnb, there was a lot of conversations around what stock compensation, which base salary, which sign-on bonus different companies offered. When I joined as a new grad, Facebook had a crazy sign-on bonus, especially if you interned at Facebook prior to joining, you converted from an intern to a full-time employee, you literally received 100K on hand just because you signed that offer. And of course, that in and of itself also has a schedule. Like if you decide to join the company and then resign a month later, you will not receive that money. I think it's pretty logical, but I think you could receive the sign bonus from 3 months to a year, depending on the company that you join. I remember when I was joining Airbnb, Facebook had a 100K sign-in bonus if you converted from an intern to a full-time employee. Is this still the case?
No, I didn't get a 100K. I think it was based on performance still on internships. I've actually heard that was somewhat of a myth that all Facebook interns got a 100K signing bonus. I think it is.
Is the sign-in bonus bigger if you convert from an intern than if you just join externally?
Yeah, it is. And I think what people don't actually consider also is if you're returning intern, the teams that are looking to take you on actually prefer that. So they know that you're going to onboard faster. So they prefer, and you generally know how the company works internally. So you'll be familiar with the internal tools and everything. So I actually find that more incentivizing, that I'll find a better team to work with.
When I joined Airbnb, the sign bonus that I've received, I believe was like $35,000 or something like that as a new grad. Maybe it was $40,000. I believe I negotiated my sign-on bonus as well. And that was obviously clearly not as high as Facebook's, but it was a decent amount of money. Also because they offered a relocation compensation. So because I was relocating from Canada to San Francisco, I think I had $9,000 additionally for just relocation expenses. This is another way how you can stack up your compensation as a tech employee by asking the company to give you a sign bonus, or the company is already offering it. Basically, there is a lot of different ways how you can receive how you can get more money. I want to very quickly touch upon negotiation. I mentioned that when I joined, I negotiated my compensation. However, I was kind of leaning more towards negotiating the base salary, so money that I literally can see and have right now, than negotiating equity, even though they did give me more equity as well. But I would highly recommend for you to negotiate your salary when you do join a company, because there is almost always some leeway, some space for you to receive a higher compensation, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking. The worst thing that can happen is that they just say no. And the best thing that can happen is, of course, you just receive more money or receive more equity, which is ideal if the company is high growth and has a lot of potential. If you're curious to see exactly how different companies compensate, you can check out my friend's company's website, levels.fyi, where you could see the exact company, the base salary, the equity grants, depending on the years of experience that you have, that you might expect by joining that specific company. It's worth mentioning that compensation is obviously significantly based on your function and on the amount of experience that you have. Something that's also happening in the industry is that, unfortunately, people in non-technical functions historically and usually receive less compensation than people in the technical functions. So if you are, let's say, joining as a marketer with 10 years of experience, it's not uncommon that you're going to get less money than someone who's joining as an engineer, even with less years of experience. This is just the unfortunate reality, kind of based on, historic trends and supply and demand. There is always a huge demand for technical roles and a little less demand for non-technical roles, hence it's harder to get a job as a non-technical person. I'm seeing it change in a lot of companies. Their compensation is getting a little more leveled out, but that's just something to keep in mind. Of course, with receiving these different forms of compensation also comes the topic of personal finance and how to manage your money. And this is the topic that I and a lot of my friends in tech have spent a lot of time on thinking, reading about, and figuring out our systems. So if you're curious about personal finance and how to manage money overall, I'm happy to make a separate video about it. And if you do want to see it, please leave a comment in the comment section down below. I also am writing a Sunday newsletter every single night, and a couple of weeks ago I've had a section where I did put some links about personal finance, just different materials that I've enjoyed learning from. So if you do want to check out this newsletter, I would really welcome you and appreciate you signing up. It's at lifeofluba.substack.com. It's completely free, and I am committed to writing one every single Sunday. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned how tech compensation works, learned how you can have a huge upside by joining a high growth startup. And if you did enjoy this video and found it useful, please don't forget to give it a like. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye for now.